It was exactly 3 o'clock a.m. when my phone lit up like a neon sign in a blackout. In the dead of night, the cafeteria's fluorescent hum was long gone, replaced by silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I'd just clocked out from a 12-hour shift serving soup to half-asleep patients, and the last thing I expected was war in my inbox. 3 o'clock a.m., my family. We tore your room apart. Lily needs a playroom. You're 26, not some pathetic freeloader. The message blinked at me like a dare. I froze in the hallway, your classic what the hell moment, just me, in my scrubs, holding a half-empty bottle of hand sanitizer. My thumb hovered over read, but I already knew every word. My heart sank so fast I wondered if it might break before I ever saw the next notification. 30 seconds later, another buzz, 3:04 a.m. My family. We signed you as co-signer on Jonah's $18,000 loan. Don't screw his life like you did yours. That was it. 2 punches to the gut before dawn. No please, no period at the end of the sentence. Just all caps aggression, delivered by the people who were supposed to have my back. And in that moment I realized I was completely, utterly alone. I didn't reply. I didn't even blink. Instead, I took a shaky step forward and headed back to what used to be my room, the little attic sanctuary I'd poured my last tips into. 2 years ago, after my job offer vanished and I moved home to regroup, I'd spent nights sealing windows, carpeting the floor, and painting the walls a soft dove grey. I'd made it my own, a private oasis above my parents' head, my proof that I could contribute more than just dirty dishes or big dreams. But now, at 3:05 a.m., I crept up the narrow stairs and found my refuge in shambles. The door lay on the floor, torn from its hinges. Plastic play kitchen pieces were scattered across the grey carpet, bright pink and blue intruders that felt like nails in my chest. My diploma lay cracked under a broken storage tub. My books, once lined up like stalwart sentinels, were tossed into a pile by the open window. My mattress was gone. I stood in the wreckage, breathing in dust and shame. I couldn't tell if the chalky drywall smell was from renovation gone wrong or from the weight of betrayal. I traced my finger along the jagged edge of the drywall where I'd once pressed my palm to steady the trowel that smoothed those walls. It was as if someone had carved out my identity in the middle of the night. Out of habit more than hope, I flipped open my bedside drawer. There it was, the manila envelope I'd stashed away months ago. Inside, a small, unassuming flash drive. I closed my fingers over it like it was a lifeline. In that split second, a memory flashed. The countless times I'd thought, someday, when it all boils over, I'll need proof. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, careful not to make a sound. No farewell, no confrontation. I just turned on my heel and walked downstairs, past the chaos, past the shattered plastic, past the echo of every insult they'd ever thrown my way. The house was silent, the only light coming from my living room lamp, where my parents should have been sleeping. Instead, the only movement was me, an intruder in my own life. On the ride back into town, the city streets were empty, streetlights flickering over puddles from an afternoon rain. I rode the bus in my scrubs, clutching that envelope like a shield. Every so often I'd peek at my phone. No new messages, no apology, nothing. Just that endless, suffocating void where family used to be. By the time the bus dropped me off, it was almost 5:30 a.m. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and walked into my friend Maya's building. She lived halfway across town in a cramped studio, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and second chances. She answered the door in slippers, yawning, but her eyes went wide when she saw me. "Elle, what the hell happened?" I just held up the envelope without a word. She let me in and poured the last of her stale coffee into a chipped mug. The steam rose between us like a silent handshake. I sank onto her threadbare couch, heart pounding, and she didn't press for details. She knew. We'd laughed at each other's worst days, cried on each other's shoulders too many times to count. Tonight, she offered me refuge without questions. As dawn broke, I stared out her window at the waking city, cars creeping along Main Street, shop lights flicking on. In that half light, I thought back to every moment I'd been called a leech, every shift I'd covered sick patients when I couldn't even save myself. And I realized something. I wasn't imagining it. This was real. This cruelty wasn't in my head. So, yeah, maybe you've seen 1,000 revenge stories where someone gets pushed too far and fights back. But nothing felt as cold as this. Nothing as final as the sound of my own door crashing off its frame. I took a sip of Maya's coffee, bitter as regret, and tapped the flash drive against my palm. It was time to show them they couldn't erase me. And just like that, the clock struck a new hour. 6:00 a.m. My shift at the cafeteria started in 90 minutes, but something had shifted inside me too. No longer the scared kid waiting for permission to exist, but someone ready to prove she belonged. The wreckage behind me was only the beginning. I still remember the first day I moved back home. I had my bachelor's diploma tucked under my arm, a car full of boxes, and a heart full of hope. My college graduation had been a blur of proud smiles and family photos, until my job offer fell through 2 days later. Then it was just me, my suitcases, and my parents' 2-story house waiting like an old friend with a glass of water and a polite smile. For a few weeks, I tried to make it work. I took a night shift at the hospital cafeteria, scrubbing dishes, ladling soup, clocking in at midnight and clocking out as the sun rose. I fixed leaky faucets, mowed the lawn, and even repainted my childhood bedroom. That attic space was my sanctuary. Dove-grey walls, a soft rug I bought with my first paycheck, a small desk by the window where I planned my next career step. I wasn't asking for much. I contributed groceries, paid part of the electric bill, and bought Lily's daycare passes every morning at 6 a.m. Some days I'd juggle 2 or 3 extra shifts just to cover unexpected costs. I'd drop Lily off, kiss her on the forehead, and tell her, "Uncle Jonah will pick you up after work." Then I'd head back to the cafeteria to refill coffee cups for surgeons half my age who called me kid. Still, every dinner table felt like a courtroom. My mother would sigh when I cleared plates for the 3rd time. My father would mutter about kids these days, and Jonah, my big brother, would lean back in his chair, smirk, and say, "You're living rent-free under our roof, Elle. Time to pull your weight." When they finally called me a pathetic freeloader and leech, it felt like salt on an open wound. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, hot mashed potatoes suddenly tasteless. If you've ever poured your heart into someone only to be branded a leech, drop a comment below, because that sting is something else. Late nights, after Lily was asleep and I was alone in my painted grey attic, I'd stare at the framed photo of my graduation, me, cap tipped at a jaunty angle, diploma in hand, hope shining in my eyes. I'd run my finger over the glass and wonder if any of it had been real. The scholarship, the late-night study sessions, the relief of walking across that stage. Was it all just a story I told myself to feel worthy? I found myself cataloguing every little kindness I'd given them. The electric bill I covered when they missed a payment. The groceries I stocked in the fridge when they claimed they didn't have time. The corners I whipped with a rag so they wouldn't feel they'd wasted money on a cleaning service. I was the unofficial repair crew, the personal chef, the unpaid nanny. All roles I took on willingly because I loved them. And yet, when it mattered most, I was invisible. My diploma cracked under a plastic toy kitchen. My books lay scattered with crayon marks. In that moment of utter chaos, I realized they never saw me as more than free labor. Every painted wall, every scrubbed toilet, every dollar I handed over, they viewed it as my obligation, not my gift. That's when I understood being helpful wasn't enough. Love, the way I knew it, came with gratitude, or at least acknowledgement, but theirs came with an unspoken ledger, my worth measured in chores done, bills paid, space occupied, and that ledger was forever in their favour, no matter how much overtime I worked. So I began to keep my own ledger. Late at night, I'd pull out my laptop and start logging every dollar I spent on shared expenses, every moment I gave up to pick up Lily, every hour I clocked beyond contract. I saved bank statements, snapped photos of utility bills I'd paid, wrote down dates and amounts. What started as a private journal became evidence, though I didn't know it yet. By the end of those weeks, I was exhausted in every sense, physically drained from double shifts and emotionally hollow from constant belittlement. I'd lie awake in that grey-walled attic, listening to the house sigh and settle around me, wondering if anyone would ever notice that I wasn't just the kid who came home. Maybe I was the one who kept the place running. One night, as I closed my laptop, I paused. The cursor blinked on the spreadsheet titled L's Contributions. There it was in black and white, the raw total of every penny I'd poured into that family. And suddenly I felt a spark of something new, clarity. If they saw me only as a freeloader, I'd show them the truth. That spark simmered as I drifted off to sleep. Just as the dawn began to push through the attic window, soon it would turn into a plan. Because sometimes being pushed all the way to the edge is the only way to see the ground below clearly, and decide whether to fall or fight back. And there, in the quiet hum of my grey sanctuary, I chose to fight. The morning after the wreckage, I slipped out of Maya's studio and headed back to my parents' house before the world fully woke up. The sun was barely peeking through low clouds, casting the neighbourhood in a soft grey hush. I stood on the sidewalk, keys clutched in my hand, and took a slow, steadying breath. I wasn't going to let them see me break. Not again. Inside, the remnants of my life lay scattered as they had the night before. I paused at the threshold of my attic room, watching the thin ribbon of dust dancing in the early light. No broken shelving, no crayon scribbles, just an empty space that once belonged to me. I set my backpack down, reached into the manila envelope taped to its underside, and pulled out the small, unassuming flash drive. My pulse quickened. This drive was my trump card, but I'd held on to it for months, waiting for the right moment. Today was the right moment. I locked the attic door behind me. I didn't need a key for them, but I wanted the symbolism of shutting them out, and hurried downstairs. The house felt cavernous in the morning light, like a theatre before the curtain rose. I drove straight to Maya's. Her studio was my makeshift war room. The smell of burnt coffee blended with leftover takeout as I booted up her old laptop. My fingers trembled slightly as I made 3 copies of the drive's contents onto her hard disk. Then I opened the first file, deedtransfer.pdf. On the screen, in crisp black and white text and official stamps, was the notarized transfer of my attic space, my sanctuary, to my name. I'd filed it 3 months ago, quietly and legally, transforming our shared home into a hybrid co-op where I had undeniable ownership of that room. As I scrolled down, the lawyer's signature shone back at me. Proof that I'd anticipated this betrayal long before they struck. A tight smile curved my lips. Next, I clicked on lilyvideo.mp4. The little red REC icon blinked in the corner. Lily's camera toy had captured more than I realised. The footage started shaky, then steadied on my parents storming into the attic. Dad's heavy boots clomped across the carpet. Mom's sobs echoed off the walls as they hauled down my carefully arranged books and tossed my diploma against the floor. You could hear Lily's soft giggle in the background as she panned the camera. She whispered, "Mommy, what are they doing?" in a voice I'd never forget. Watching them through my daughter's lens was infuriating. There was Dad's face, red with anger, hands curled into fists, while Mum murmured something under her breath, an apology, maybe, but her tears felt like an excuse. I hit pause, my chest tight with anger. That clip alone was enough to indict them in the court of public opinion. Finally, I opened Parents' Confession, MP3. The file was dated 6 months back. My throat tightened as Dad's voice crackled through the speakers. I swear, Helen, I can't stand her softness. She's like a sponge, just soaking up our money and energy. Maybe it'd be better if she never belonged here anymore. Mum's voice chimed in, calm and icy. It's not that I want her gone. It's just, sometimes I wonder if we'd be better off without that constant reminder of failure. Failure. The word hit me like a punch. They weren't just tearing down a room, they were tearing down my very existence. I sat back, silent tears pooling in my eyes. All this time I'd thought their barbs were figure of speech, that leech and freeloader were exaggerations, but here, in cold audio, I heard they genuinely wanted me erased from their lives. I swallowed hard, steadying myself. The betrayal cut deeper than any shattered drywall. I'd carried their groceries, paid their bills, loved that little girl fiercely, only to be branded a burden, a mistake. My vision blurred. I closed my eyes, picturing Lily's innocent smile, Maya's steady presence, and the city outside that didn't know my name. When I opened my eyes, a new resolve burned inside me. This wasn't about revenge in the cartoonish sense. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I rifled through the flash drive one more time to confirm every file was there. Deed transfer, Lily's recording, the confession. Then I created 2 folders on the desktop, community evidence and legal case. Under community evidence, I compiled the video and confession together, adding a text file with timestamps and brief descriptions. Under legal case, I sorted the deed transfer alongside the ledger spreadsheet I'd been building, every utility bill, grocery receipt, and daycare invoice I'd paid over the last year. I even included bank statements coloured with annotations. May 10th, electricity bill, $120, paid by L, and so on. By the time I closed Maya's laptop, it was past noon. My phone buzzed with texts from my parents and Jonah, demanding explanations, apologies, frantic pleas. I ignored them. Instead, I stood by her loft window, looking out at traffic flowing below, imagining a world where I was more than a number in someone else's ledger. Natural audience interaction. As I watched the steam swirl from Maya's second pot of coffee, I found myself wondering, have you ever found proof of someone's betrayal hidden in plain sight? If so, let me know in the comments what you did next. Because right now, I'm about to share this evidence with everyone who'll listen. I hadn't planned it at first, but by the time the newscaster flashed across the local Facebook group feed with a clip of Dad screaming on the lawn, I knew it was inevitable. My parents thought they could destroy me in a single night, rip apart my refuge and whitewash it with chalky plastic. But they didn't know I held the receipts. I took a deep breath and hit upload. The files began to sift through cyberspace, landing on neighbourhood forums, community watch pages, and a handful of nurse groups I'd joined for moral support. I watched the view count climb, hundreds, then thousands. Comments popped up. I can't believe they'd do that to you. Your parents are monsters. And you deserve so much better. A lump rose in my throat, not just triumph, but relief. For the first time in months, I felt seen. The silence they'd built around me was breaking, and though I knew the fallout would be messy, I also knew this was the only way to make them hear the truth. Because sometimes the only way out of the shadows of betrayal is to shine a light so bright it exposes everything. And that's exactly what I was about to do. I sat in the lobby of Nadia Patel's office building, legs bouncing on the marble floor, clutching my coffee like it was life support. The morning sun spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the waiting area in gold. It should have been peaceful. Instead, my stomach twisted in knots. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and craving, the moment I handed over my weapons and asked an expert to turn them into justice. A soft chime announced my name. Nadia Patel appeared, tall and composed, wearing a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb stress. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had grilled countless abusers in court, and won. She extended a hand. "Elle, welcome. Please, come in." Her office was serene, shelves of legal tomes, a potted fern by the window, and an impeccably organised desk. I set my manila envelope and flash drive on the surface and took a seat. Nadia sank into her chair across from me. She studied the envelope without speaking, then tilted her head. "I understand you have evidence of financial and emotional abuse by your parents. Is that correct?" I took a breath. "Yes. Everything I've been through, the eviction from my own attic room, the forged cosigner on my brother's $18,000 loan, the months of insults and manipulation, they're all documented. Audio recordings, video footage, and even the deed transfer showing I legally own that room." She nodded slowly, then reached for the flash drive. "Let's start with the deed." I watched her plug the drive into her laptop and open deedtransfer.pdf. The notarized document appeared on her screen in crisp type. She scrolled through, eyes narrowing slightly at the official seals and signatures. "This is airtight," she said. "They tried to destroy your space without realizing you'd already secured ownership. That's clever." I felt a flicker of pride. It bought me time to collect everything else. She clicked over to Lily Video MP4. The footage of my parents tearing up my walls played silently at first, then erupted into the soundtrack of their anger and Lily's soft, confused giggles. Nadia paused the video on Dad's red-faced scowl. "Visual evidence like this is gold. It shows intent to harm you, and it's impossible for them to deny it." Next came Parents' Confession, MP3. I watched her expression harden as my mother's icy voice admitted she wished I never belonged here. When the recording ended, she leaned back, steepled her fingers, and was silent for a moment. "This is more than a civil matter," she said finally. "We can file a fraud claim with the lender immediately to freeze that $18,000 loan. Then we move on to civil charges for emotional abuse and financial exploitation." My chest flooded with relief. I needed them to stop pretending I wasn't real. She offered a small, understanding smile. "They've underestimated you. Now we'll make sure the law makes them see you clearly." Planning the public reveal. With the legal front secured, it was time to rally community support. Nadia's office felt like a calm before the storm. She outlined the plan. Upload Lily's footage to the neighbourhood Facebook group. Post the confession audio and deed transfer documents to a private local watchdog forum. Prepare a concise statement summarising my case, with timestamps and supporting scans of ledger entries. By noon, I was seated at Maya's kitchen table again, laptop open to 3 browser tabs: Facebook Neighbourhood Watch, Local Mums Group, and City Legal Aid Forum. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I composed a brief post. "Hi everyone, my name's Elle Ramirez. Yesterday, my parents demolished my attic room to turn it into a playroom for my niece, only I own that room. Here's the video my daughter recorded, the deed transfer showing my legal ownership, and an audio file of my parents admitting they never wanted me here. I've filed a fraud claim to freeze the $18,000 loan they forced me to co-sign. I never asked for this, but I refuse to be erased. Please watch, share, and help me get the support I need." I paused. The words trembling on the screen felt raw and vulnerable. At the same time, every letter was truth. I wasn't exaggerating or spinning a tale. I hit post. Almost instantly, notifications began to roll in. "Oh my God, Elle, I'm so sorry this happened to you." This is exactly why we start these community pages. What can we do to help? Fundraiser? Legal aid? A heated thread exploded beneath the video. Neighbours sharing similar experiences, local mums expressing outrage, and a few older residents reminiscing about times when families stuck together. Building momentum. Within an hour, the local news outlets picked up the story. A reporter from the Metro Tribune messaged me for an interview. I declined. Nadia advised keeping the legal team in the loop first. Instead, I focused on responding to comments, thanking people for their messages, and quietly forwarding leads on supportive service groups to Nadia's email. I closed my laptop as the afternoon sun dipped low. My phone buzzed non-stop. Calls from a local domestic abuse hotline offering counselling. Messages from friends pledging to drive me to appointments. Texts from Lily's daycare worker offering extra hours so I could catch up on sleep. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. The isolation that had felt like a cage began to crack. A moment of reflection. That evening, I stopped by the silent ruins of my old attic room. The boards were still splintered, nails protruding into the open space. But now they stood as proof of something more than loss. They were the backdrop to my transformation. I slid my hand along a broken beam, remembering how it once sheltered my dreams. Under the twilight sky, I whispered, "You can't erase me." And in that moment, I no longer believed I was a victim to be swept aside. I had turned the tide, arming myself with truth, marshalling my evidence, and galvanizing my community. Tomorrow, Nadia and I would file the official documents. But tonight, I allowed myself a rare, quiet smile, knowing that after so long in the shadows of abandonment, I was finally stepping into the light. By mid-afternoon, the neighbourhood Facebook group had exploded. My post, complete with Lily's shaky footage of my parents in full meltdown, the confession audio and the deed transfer, had racked up thousands of views. Every new comment was a nail in the coffin of their denials. I was at Maya's again, laptop propped on her kitchen island as notifications chimed non-stop. Messages poured in, neighbours offering spare rooms, old friends sharing similar tales of betrayal, and even Jonah's college roommates slagging him online. I scrolled in a haze, half dreading what would come next, and half itching for it. Around 4 p.m, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was the lender's fraud department. "Ms. Ramirez," the voice said, calm but serious, "we've received your claim regarding the unauthorized cosigner on this $18,000 loan. We've frozen the account pending investigation." I blinked until I saw double. "You froze it?" "Effective immediately. We will notify you once the review concludes." My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in months. Relief, the literal weight of someone else's debt lifting off me in one swift action. I sank onto Maya's bar stool, heart hammering. That same evening, a local reporter from the Metro Tribune turned up at my parents' house. I didn't invite her, but word travels fast when chaos reigns. I watched from across the street as Mum, mascara running, stepped onto the porch clutching her rosary, and Dad paced in his boxers, cigarette hanging from his lip. The camera crew trained lights on them, then cut to me, leaning against my car. The reporter's mic hovered just inches from my face. "Elle," she began, "what do you hope to achieve with this exposure?" I looked her straight in the eye. "I want them, and everyone else, to stop pretending I don't exist, to show that abuse can come home, and to remind anyone out there who's been erased, you matter." Her questions faded as the lens panned back to my parents, their mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. I realized then that the power had shifted. They were on trial, publicly and irrevocably. Over the next 24 hours, community support swung from shock to genuine solidarity. Neighbours shared stories of petty theft, slander, and manipulation they'd never reported. A GoFundMe sprang up. Not for me, but to cover legal fees for anyone facing family exploitation. I watched donations climb, strangers pledging hundreds of dollars to help bring predatory parents to justice. At the church's weekly potluck, Mrs. Langston, the same woman who used to tiptoe by my room at 10 p.m, pulled me aside. "I'm so sorry I never spoke up," she whispered, handing me a folded casserole. "I should have said something years ago." Her voice cracked, and I hugged her, feeling a flood of compassion for her guilt, and for every person who'd stayed silent too long. That night, I returned to the ruins of my attic room one last time. With the lone frozen and the world watching, the broken beams no longer looked like symbols of loss. They felt like monuments to my resilience. I stood there in the half-light, the echo of community outrage still humming in my ears, and whispered, "Justice isn't perfect, but it's progress." I left a single photo on the windowsill, Lily's tiny handprint in wet paint, done months ago when we redecorated together. It was a reminder that even amid betrayal, love finds a way to leave its mark. As I closed the attic door, I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. For the first time, I knew I had a home, not because of walls or a deed, but because I belonged to myself and a community that refused to let me be forgotten. A week after the world watched my parents implode, I stepped into a tiny studio apartment that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. The movers had dropped off the last box, carefully labelled Elle's Essentials, and I stood in the centre of the empty room, listening to the echo of my own footsteps. No drywall to repair, no crayon on the walls, just 4 blank canvases waiting for me to call them home. I unpacked slowly. A small lamp by the window, the battered coffee mug from Maya's kitchen, and finally, the single framed photo I'd chosen for the wall. It was me at 14, sitting alone at a birthday table draped in a pastel tablecloth. No candles, no cake, no family. Back then, I hated that picture. Now, it felt like armour. Proof that I had survived being truly alone. That night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, the photo leaning against the wall in front of me. I texted Maya a simple 2-word update. "I'm home." She replied instantly with a string of heart emojis and, "Welcome to freedom." My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mum. "Lily misses you," the text read. I stared at it, thumb hovering over reply. Part of me wanted to explain why I couldn't come back just yet. Part of me wanted to comfort my daughter. But I knew I needed more time to rebuild. So I sent one word: safe. I set my phone aside and took a deep breath. This was my space now, my rules, my peace. No more walking on eggshells or pretending I didn't matter. I could hear Lily's laughter echo in my mind, a reminder that love wasn't confined to walls built by people who refused to see me. Over the next few days, I filled the apartment with small joys. A potted succulent on the windowsill, a stack of notebooks for my next plan, and a playlist of songs I'd never dared to play at home. Each item was a milestone, a declaration that I was worthy of comfort and joy. As dawn broke on my first full morning alone, I opened the curtains and let sunlight flood the room. The city stretched out below, busy, imperfect, alive. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered, "I belong here." And in that moment, I knew the fight had changed. It wasn't about proving my worth to people who refused to see it. It was about living a life that honoured my own strength and kindness. Natural audience interaction. Have you ever had to reclaim your own space after feeling erased? Share your story in the comments below, and if you believe everyone deserves a place to call home, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of finding strength in the shadows.